The vast, cold expanse of space stretched out endlessly beyond the window of the small exploration shuttle as it drifted through the atmosphere of Zyphar 6. Dr. Elena Foster sat in the pilot's seat, her hands steady on the controls, her mind alight with excitement and anticipation. The stars beyond were pinpricks of ancient light, a familiar yet distant reminder of Earth's fragile existence. But the planet below her was anything but familiar. This world was new, untouched by human eyes or human hands. Elena had spent her entire career searching for signs of extraterrestrial life, but nothing had prepared her for the moment she touched down on a planet that had never known the presence of a human being. Zyphar 6 was a discovery that had sent shockwaves through the scientific community, a distant exoplanet, located on the outer edge of the galaxy, showing faint traces of intelligent life. Its atmosphere was rich with unknown gases, and its surface teemed with strange energy signatures that defied explanation. The mission had been months in the making, and now, here she was alone on an alien world, her heart pounding in her chest as the shuttle's landing gear touched the surface with a soft thud. She powered down the engines, listening as the hum of the shuttle's systems slowly faded into silence. For a moment, the only sound was her own breathing, amplified in the enclosed space of her helmet. The visor of her suit fogged slightly as she exhaled, a reminder of the inhospitable air outside. Zyphar 6's atmosphere was thick and dense, not immediately lethal but certainly not breathable for a human. Elena had no choice but to remain inside the protective confines of her environmental suit as she ventured out. The doors hissed open, and a wave of heavy, humid air rushed into the shuttle. Elena stepped forward, her boots sinking slightly into the soft, porous ground beneath her. The landscape that unfolded before her was a breathtaking tapestry of alien beauty. Jagged, towering crystalline formations jutted out of the earth like massive shards of glass, their surfaces shimmering with an ethereal glow as they refracted the dim light of Zyphar 6's distant sun. The sky above was a swirling mass of dark, stormy clouds, tinted with shades of violet and deep indigo. Every so often, the clouds would pulse with streaks of electric blue light, as though the atmosphere itself was alive with energy. But it was the silence that struck Elena the most. A heavy, oppressive silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of static in her comms as the shuttle's sensors adjusted to the planet's magnetic field. No birds, no wind, no rustling leaves, just stillness. As though the planet itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Elena felt a shiver of excitement run down her spine. First contact, the very idea was almost impossible to grasp. Humanity had long speculated about the existence of intelligent life beyond Earth, but to stand here, on an alien planet, knowing that something was watching, something intelligent, was both thrilling and terrifying. Beginning initial survey, she muttered, her voice low as she activated the recording device on her wrist. Zyphar 6, first surface exploration. Landscape is crystalline, possible silicon-based structures, no signs of flora or fauna, yet. Her words trailed off as her eyes scanned the horizon. There was something eerie about the stillness, something unsettling about how perfect it all was, almost too perfect. Elena continued her cautious advance, moving toward the nearest crystalline structure. It stood nearly 10 feet tall, its surface smooth and almost reflective. As she reached out to touch it, her gloved hand met unexpected resistance. It wasn't hard like glass or stone, it was pliant, as though the crystal was alive, shifting subtly beneath her touch. Fascinating, she whispered, stepping back to record her findings. The material appears to be semi-organic in nature. It has properties I've never seen before. Could be. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft tremor beneath her feet. She froze, the hair on the back of her neck standing on end. The ground beneath her was moving, but not in the way a planet might naturally quake. No, this was different. The tremor felt rhythmic, purposeful, as though something beneath the surface was shifting. She turned slowly, her hand instinctively reaching for the small plasma pistol strapped to her side. She didn't want to use it, not unless she had to. The mission was to explore, to make contact, not to engage in combat. But the training was hardwired into her, and years of experience had taught her that the unknown was not always friendly. The tremors intensified, and a low, pulsating hum filled the air. It was coming from behind her. Elena turned, her heart pounding in her chest as she scanned the landscape. And that's when she saw it movement, a figure emerging from behind one of the larger crystalline formations. At first, it was just a shadow barely visible in the dim light. But as it moved closer, its form became clearer. Her breath caught in her throat. The being the alien was unlike anything she had ever seen in her life. It stood taller than her, nearly 7 feet in height, its body slender yet powerful. Its skin, or was it skin, glowed faintly with an iridescent shimmer, like the surface of the crystalline structures that dotted the landscape. It had no discernible mouth or nose, just large, black eyes that seemed to reflect the light of the crystals around it. 4 long, multi-jointed limbs extended from its torso, each one tipped with delicate, claw-like appendages. And as it moved, it did so with a fluid, almost graceful motion, as though its body was more liquid than solid. Elena's heart raced, her mind scrambling to process what she was seeing. This was it, first contact. The alien stopped a few feet away from her, its head tilting slightly as though it was studying her. There was no immediate aggression, no sign of hostility, but there was a tension in the air that made Elena's fingers tighten around the grip of her pistol. "Hello," she called out, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts to remain calm. I'm Dr. Elena Foster. I come in peace." Her words seemed to hang in the air, unanswered. The alien made no sound, but its eyes, those impossibly black eyes, seemed to flicker slightly as though it was processing her words. Then, without warning, it raised one of its limbs and pointed toward her. Not in a threatening manner, but more like a gesture of curiosity. Elena didn't move. She could feel the sweat beading on her forehead inside the helmet, her pulse racing. This was the moment she had dreamed of her entire life. And yet, standing face to face with an actual alien being, she was filled with an overwhelming sense of vulnerability. The alien's hand, or what passed for a hand, reached toward her, its movements slow and deliberate. Elena's instincts screamed at her to back away, to raise her weapon, but she held her ground, her breath shallow as she watched the creature's movements. And then, it touched her. A soft, barely perceptible touch on the surface of her environmental suit. The moment the contact was made, Elena felt a strange sensation ripple through her body, a warmth, almost electric, that seemed to pulse from the point of contact. It wasn't painful, but it was intense. She gasped, instinctively pulling back, her heart pounding in her chest. The alien's hand dropped immediately, and it took a step back, as though it, too, had been surprised by the intensity of the contact. Its eyes flickered again, and for the first time, Elena thought she saw something in them, something more than just cold observation. Something like curiosity, or perhaps recognition. Elena took a deep breath, her mind racing. This being, whatever it was, wasn't hostile. At least not yet. It seemed just as interested in her as she was in it. But the question remained, how could they communicate? How could they bridge the vast chasm of understanding that existed between two species so fundamentally different? As she stood there, face to face with an alien being from a world she could barely comprehend, Elena felt the weight of her mission settling on her shoulders. This was no longer just about science or discovery. This was about something far more profound. This was about making a connection. "Can you understand me?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can we communicate?" The alien's eyes flickered again, and for a brief moment she thought she felt something, a presence, a soft whisper in the back of her mind. It wasn't a voice, not in the traditional sense, but more like a fleeting impression, a sense of awareness brushing against her thoughts. And then, just as quickly as it had come, it was gone. Elena blinked, her heart racing as she tried to process what had just happened. Had it been real, or was her mind playing tricks on her? Before she could say anything else, the alien turned and began to move away, its body once again becoming a fluid shadow against the crystalline landscape. "Wait," Elena called out, taking a step forward. But the alien didn't stop. It disappeared behind one of the larger formations, leaving Elena standing alone in the silence. She exhaled, her body trembling with adrenaline. This was just the beginning. The sun on Zyphar 6 was a distant star, casting only a pale, ghostly light over the planet's alien surface. "Doctor." Elena Foster sat cross-legged in front of the crystalline formation, where she had first encountered the alien, CR, her thoughts racing in every direction as she tried to piece together what had happened. Her heart had calmed since that initial encounter, but the memory of the alien's touch still lingered, an almost electric sensation that rippled through her mind every time she thought about it. She had spent the night inside her shuttle, poring over data, trying to find anything that could help her understand the strange interaction, but the data was inconclusive. The alien's physiology was completely foreign, and the instruments she had relied on for years were almost useless on this planet. Zyphar 6 didn't conform to the rules she knew. It defied logic, like a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Elena had made the decision to return to the site of the encounter at dawn, hoping that Taziar would come back. It was a gamble, one based on a hunch more than science, but she couldn't shake the feeling that their interaction wasn't a one-time event. The way the alien had observed her, the brief yet intense moment of physical contact, it was all too deliberate. He had been curious just as she was. The sky was a swirling sea of deep purples and dark blues, with streaks of light flashing intermittently in the clouds above. Every so often, the air seemed to hum with a low-frequency vibration, almost like the planet itself was breathing. Elena's environmental suit, though equipped for a wide range of conditions, felt almost stifling here. The atmosphere of Zyphar 6 was dense and thick, like wading through water instead of air, and the faint buzzing in her helmet, likely from the interference of the planet's strange magnetic field, never fully subsided. She stared at the landscape before her, wondering if Tiar was watching her again. Was he observing from a distance, hidden among the towering crystal formations, or was he waiting for her to make the next move? Elena lifted her wrist and began recording again, her voice steady but tinged with the excitement she could barely contain. Day 2 of surface exploration. No signs of immediate contact, but the energy patterns remain consistent. The being whom I will tentatively refer to as Taziar appears to exhibit some form of telepathic ability. Initial interaction suggests that it, or he, is intelligent and curious but cautious. The goal today is to attempt some form of communication. She stopped the recording and glanced up, scanning the horizon. Nothing moved, not even the air. The planet's silence was all-consuming. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself. She had spent years training for this, preparing for the unknown. But now, faced with a truly alien intelligence, she felt woefully unprepared. The textbooks back on Earth, the simulations, none of them had accounted for the reality of what she was experiencing now. First contact had always been a theoretical concept, a scientific dream. Now, it was something far more complex. Something personal. A soft vibration under her feet brought her back to the present. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but she knew what it meant. He was here. Elena opened her eyes and stood slowly, her breath caught in her throat as she turned toward the source of the disturbance. From behind the same crystalline formation as yesterday, the figure of Tsiar emerged. He moved with that same fluid grace, his bioluminescent skin shimmering in the faint light as he approached. The crystalline structures reflected his glow, casting dancing patterns of light across the ground between them. This time she did not reach for her weapon. Instead, she took a single step forward, keeping her hands at her sides in what she hoped was a non-threatening posture. Tsiar stopped a few feet away, his black eyes locking onto hers. There was an intensity in his gaze that sent a shiver down her spine. It was as if he was not just looking at her, but into her, scanning her thoughts, her emotions. "Can you understand me?" Elena asked, her voice calm but measured. She knew the chances of verbal communication were slim, but she had to try. "I'm not here to harm you. I want to communicate." Tsiar made no sound, no discernible movement, other than a slight tilt of his head. It was a gesture that almost seemed thoughtful, as though he were contemplating her words. Elena felt a flicker of hope. He hadn't turned away. He was listening, if not to her words, then perhaps to the intention behind them. Without warning, Tsiar raised one of his long, multi-jointed limbs and extended it toward her. The movement was slow, deliberate. Elena's heart skipped a beat, but she held her ground. She recognized the gesture. It was the same as the day before, when he had touched her suit. This time, however, she was ready. Elena raised her hand in response, mimicking his gesture. Their hands, or rather his clawed appendage, and her gloved hand hovered inches apart. The air between them seemed to hum with a faint energy, as though the space itself was charged. And then, with the lightest of touches, Tsiar's limb made contact with her hand. The sensation was immediate, an almost electric pulse shot through her body, but it wasn't painful. It was a feeling unlike anything she had ever experienced before, a strange mixture of warmth and pressure, as though his touch was probing not just her physical form but her mind. It wasn't telepathy in the traditional sense. There were no words, no thoughts directly communicated, but there was something. A sense of awareness. An impression. CR's eyes flickered again, and in that moment, Elena realized that he was trying to understand her, just as she was trying to understand him, but their methods of communication were so vastly different. Where humans relied on speech, body language, and even written symbols, CR's species seemed to operate on a level that transcended those basic concepts. How do we bridge this gap? Elena murmured, more to herself than to Taziar. There has to be a way. She withdrew her hand slowly, careful not to alarm him. CR remained still, watching her with that same inscrutable gaze. Then, an idea struck her. Elena took a deep breath and reached into one of the pouches on her suit, pulling out a small data pad. She quickly pulled up a simple mathematical equation, a universal language, or so she hoped. Holding the pad out in front of her, she showed Taziar the sequence of numbers, symbols, and lines that formed the basic equation. Math, she said, pointing at the pad and then at him. This is a language we both understand. For a moment, Taziar didn't react. He simply stared at the pad, his eyes flickering as they took in the information. Then, slowly, his body began to shift. The bioluminescent glow on his skin pulsed, and Elena watched in astonishment as the patterns of light on his body changed. They were forming symbols, the same symbols she had just shown him on the pad. He was mimicking the mathematical equation, displaying it through the patterns on his skin. Elena's heart leapt in her chest. This was the first step toward communication. Yes, she exclaimed, unable to hide her excitement. That's right, you understand. Ziar's body pulsed again, the lights shifting into a new pattern. It wasn't an exact replica of the equation, but a variation, an addition to it. He was responding, continuing the equation. Elena's mind raced as she quickly adjusted the numbers on her data pad, sending the next part of the sequence. It was a rudimentary exchange, but it was something, a bridge between their two worlds. For the next few minutes, they exchanged simple mathematical sequences, each one building on the last. It was slow, methodical, but it was communication. Elena felt a thrill, unlike anything she had ever experienced before. She was no longer alone in this alien world. She had made contact. But as the exchange continued, Elena began to realize something else. TZR wasn't just mimicking or learning from her. There was an intelligence behind his actions, a curiosity that went beyond simple mathematical patterns. He was trying to understand her on a deeper level. He was searching for something more than just knowledge. And then, without warning, Taziar's body began to pulse with a different kind of energy. The lights on his skin shifted into more complex patterns, abstract shapes, symbols that didn't correspond to the mathematical language they had been using. Elena frowned, trying to make sense of the new patterns. They were more fluid, more organic, and then it hit her they weren't numbers. They were ideas, emotions. CR was trying to communicate something deeper, something that went beyond logic and reason. He was trying to express feelings, concepts that couldn't be quantified or calculated. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she realized what was happening. CR wasn't just interested in understanding her mind. He wanted to understand her emotions. The patterns on his skin grew more complex, more beautiful, as though he were painting with light. It was mesmerizing, and for a moment, Elena felt a strange connection, as though she could feel the emotion behind the patterns: curiosity, fascination, and was that fear? Or was it awe? It was impossible to tell. Elena took a deep breath and slowly raised her hand again, placing it gently on her chest. This, she said softly, tapping the area over her heart, is what you're looking for. CR's eyes flickered, and for the first time, Elena thought she saw something in them that resembled understanding. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The gap between them was still vast, but with each moment they spent together, they were drawing closer. Something profound was happening, a connection that transcended the boundaries of species, logic, and science. Elena didn't fully understand it yet, but she knew one thing for certain: this was only the beginning. CR stepped back, his body glowing softly in the dim light of Zyphar 6's sky. He regarded Elena for a long moment, then turned and disappeared into the crystalline forest, leaving her standing there, her heart racing with the realization that she had just taken the first step into a new world, one that would forever change the way she saw the universe and herself. As the silence of the planet settled around her once more, Elena smiled. The unknown was no longer something to fear. It was something to embrace. And tomorrow, she would be ready for whatever came next. The days on Zyphar 6 were long, almost double the length of Earth's, and yet time seemed to slip away faster than Elena could grasp. After the breakthrough with the mathematical patterns, her interactions with CR had evolved into something far more complex, far more profound. Communication, once a seemingly insurmountable barrier, had become easier. Tiziar's telepathic pulses, which had initially been fleeting impressions, were now clearer shadows of thoughts and concepts that Elena could almost interpret. But as their understanding of each other grew, something deeper began to emerge. It wasn't just about sharing knowledge anymore. It was about understanding the why behind that knowledge. Elena was beginning to see that Tiziar wasn't just an explorer of facts, he was curious about the emotional landscapes humans navigated. For a species that had evolved without emotional expression in the way humans understood it, CR was becoming increasingly fascinated by the one aspect of humanity that science couldn't explain: feelings. The soft light of Zyphar 6's sun filtered through the dense clouds as Elena walked through the now familiar crystalline forest, the terrain uneven under her feet. Her environmental suit, once a bulky reminder of her alien surroundings, now felt like a second skin. She had grown accustomed to the planet's peculiar atmosphere, the constant hum of energy in the air, and the thick, humid air pressing against her suit. Today, however, she felt a weight she hadn't before: attention, one that was not caused by the environment but by the ever-evolving relationship between her and Tiziar. CR had been waiting for her near the same crystal formation where they had first met. His tall, iridescent form was almost indistinguishable from the surrounding environment, his bioluminescent skin reflecting the violet hues of the landscape. But Elena had grown attuned to his presence, able to sense his approach before she even saw him. There was something about the way the air seemed to shift when he was near, a faint ripple that made her skin tingle. As she approached, she could see the now familiar flickering in his large, black eyes, a sign that he was preparing to communicate. Over the past several days, they had developed a rhythm, a way of exchanging ideas through a combination of light patterns on his skin and the increasingly vivid telepathic impressions he sent her. They had already moved beyond numbers and shapes. CR was learning about Earth, about humanity, and about Elena herself. But the deeper they delved into these subjects, the more Elena realized that Tiziar was trying to understand something more fundamental: human emotions. Today she had decided to confront this head-on. She approached slowly, her hands at her sides, making no sudden movements. Even though CR had never shown any signs of aggression, she knew he was still cautious around her. But today felt different. There was a strange intensity in the air, as though CR was waiting for her to reveal something he couldn't quite grasp on his own. "Hello again," Elena said softly, though she knew he didn't need words to understand her presence. She had taken to speaking aloud anyway, feeling that her voice added a layer of comfort, a reminder that she was still human in this alien landscape. CR stood still, watching her. His eyes, those impossibly dark, reflective orbs, seemed to pierce through her, as if searching for something beyond her physical form. The lights on his body pulsed gently, slowly shifting in a rhythmic pattern that Elena had come to associate with curiosity. Elena took a deep breath and decided to address the subject that had been lingering between them for days. She raised her hand, placing it over her heart, the way she had when she first tried to convey the concept of emotions. "Sire," she began, keeping her tone steady, "I know you've been trying to understand more than just my language or my knowledge. You're trying to understand." This she tapped her chest lightly, signaling her heart. "You're trying to understand emotions." Cesiar's body shifted slightly, the pulsing lights on his skin accelerating, becoming more vibrant. He understood the concept of emotions, or at least he was trying to. But Elena knew that for a species like his, who relied on logical cooperation and shared knowledge, the idea of emotional connections, intimacy, love, fear was foreign. "I want to show you," she continued, her voice soft but resolute. "But it's not easy to explain. Emotions are complex. They're not like numbers or patterns. They're felt." She hesitated, searching for the right words. "They're experienced." CR's gaze remained fixed on her, his body still except for the gentle flickering of light. Elena took a step closer, aware that what she was about to do could change the dynamic between them forever. She was about to cross a boundary that she wasn't sure either of them fully understood. "You've been curious about human intimacy," she said quietly, recalling the previous conversations they had had about touch and connection, especially about physical gestures, like a kiss. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and full of meaning that Taziar couldn't possibly grasp, but he had asked about it before, intrigued by the way humans expressed emotions through touch. To him, the concept of using the body to communicate affection, love, or trust was alien. His species had evolved without those kinds of physical interactions. Elena stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the faint warmth radiating from Ciar's bioluminescent skin, though they weren't touching. Her heart was pounding in her chest, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She wasn't sure how Ciar would react, but she had to try. This was the only way he could understand, and perhaps the only way she could bridge the gap between their worlds. "A kiss," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's more than just a physical act. It's a way of showing trust, connection, and affection. It's how we as humans express something deeper, something words or gestures can't fully capture." Ciar's body flickered with light, his head tilting slightly, as though he were processing her words. Elena took one final breath and then gently, cautiously, she leaned forward and placed a soft kiss on the place where his cheek might have been if he had human features. Her lips brushed against the cool surface of his glowing skin, and for a moment nothing happened. But then everything changed. As soon as the kiss was made, a wave of sensation rippled through Elena's body. It was as if Taziar's telepathic abilities had flared to life, amplifying the physical contact into something far more profound. The kiss was no longer just a gesture, it was a connection, a bridge between their two minds, their two worlds. Elena felt her breath catch as an overwhelming flood of impressions filled her mind. It wasn't thoughts exactly, but emotions, echoes of what Taziar was experiencing. There was curiosity, yes, but also confusion. And beneath that, something deeper, a flicker of awe. Ciar's body glowed brighter, the lights on his skin pulsing in sync with the racing of Elena's heart. She could feel his presence more acutely now, as though his mind was pressing gently against hers, probing not with words but with feelings. The electric sensation she had felt before, during their first contact, was now magnified tenfold. She felt like her entire being was exposed, laid bare to him in a way she had never experienced before. And yet, there was no fear. Only a strange, exhilarating sense of connection. As the moment stretched on, Elena began to sense something else, a flicker of recognition from Ciar. He was beginning to understand, not fully, but enough to grasp that the kiss wasn't just a physical act. It was an emotional bridge, a way of sharing something that couldn't be conveyed through logic or language. She pulled back slowly, her breath unsteady, her heart still pounding in her chest. Ciar's lights dimmed slightly, his body returning to its usual soft glow. He didn't move for a long moment, as though processing what had just occurred. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he raised one of his limbs and gently placed it over the area of his body where Elena had kissed him. There was no telepathic communication, no pulse of thought or feeling. But Elena didn't need it. She could see the understanding in the way his body shifted, the way his lights flickered with a new rhythm, one that spoke of discovery. He understood now. Not fully, but enough to know that human emotions were something far more intricate than he had ever imagined, and the kiss had opened the door to that understanding. Elena smiled, her body still tingling from the experience. She had done it, she had shown him what words could never express, but this was only the beginning. Ciar had felt the barest edge of what it meant to be human, to connect on an emotional level. And now she knew he would want to learn more. That she said softly, her voice filled with awe, is how we share something deeper. It's not just a touch, it's a connection. Ciar's eyes flickered, and for the first time since they had met, Elena thought she saw something more than curiosity in his gaze. There was a hint of something new, something that could only be described as wonder. Elena took a step back, allowing herself to breathe. She had crossed a line, but it felt like the right line to cross. The connection between them had shifted, deepened. She could feel it in the air, in the way Taziar watched her now, no longer as an unknown entity but as something closer, more familiar. "I'll show you more," she promised. "There's so much more to learn." Ciar's body pulsed gently in response, a soft, rhythmic glow that seemed to echo the promise she had made. Elena knew they were on the verge of something extraordinary. The gap between their species, once so vast and insurmountable, had begun to close. And it all started with a simple, human gesture, one that had transcended the boundaries of biology, culture, and even logic. As she turned to leave, heading back toward her shuttle to prepare for another day of exploration, Elena couldn't help but smile. The sky above Zyphar 6 hung heavy with swirling violet clouds, their dense, opaque forms pulsing with faint flashes of light. It had been several days since the kiss, since the moment that had altered everything for both Elena and Teziar. And yet, the energy of that moment lingered in the air, as if the planet itself had absorbed the gravity of their connection. Every time Elena stepped outside the shuttle now, she could feel it, a subtle hum, a rhythm in sync with the emotions they had begun to explore together. Elena stood at the edge of a crystalline plateau, gazing out over the alien landscape that had become both familiar and foreign in equal measure. The jagged spires of crystalline formations shimmered in the dim light, casting long shadows across the surface of the planet. The silence here was no longer unnerving, it had become a companion of sorts, a quiet witness to the profound discoveries she had made. Her fingers toyed absent-mindedly with the straps of her environmental suit, though she barely noticed the weight of it anymore. Zyphar 6's thick, oppressive atmosphere had become a background presence, something she had learned to navigate instinctively. What weighed on her now wasn't the physical environment, but the choices that loomed ahead, the decisions that would shape not only her future but the future of humanity's relationship with this alien world. Behind her, she sensed movement. She didn't need to turn to know that Teziar was approaching. His presence was like a warm pulse, a ripple in the air that signaled his arrival long before she could see him. Over the past days, they had developed an unspoken understanding, a bond that went beyond mere curiosity or even friendship. It was something more, a connection that defied the logic of their respective species. When Teziar appeared beside her, his body shimmering with the soft, bioluminescent glow that had become so familiar, Elena turned to meet his gaze. His dark, reflective eyes locked onto hers, and for a brief moment, the world around them seemed to fade into the background. In the space between them, there was an unspoken conversation, one that didn't require words or even thoughts. It was an exchange of presence, of emotion, of understanding. Today felt different, though. There was a tension in the air that Elena couldn't quite place, a sense that something was coming to a head. She had known for some time that the longer she remained on Zyphar 6, the more complex her relationship with Tsiar and with the planet itself would become. But now, as they stood together on the plateau, she could feel the weight of the decision she had to make pressing down on her. "You've been quiet," she said softly, her voice carried away by the wind. She had long since abandoned the idea that Teziar couldn't understand her spoken words. Even if he didn't grasp the exact meaning, he understood her intent. They had evolved past the need for traditional communication. Tsiar's eyes flickered, the lights on his body shifting in gentle waves. He raised one of his limbs slightly, and Elena felt the faintest brush of his mind against hers, an impression, not quite a thought, but close enough. It was a sense of anticipation, of waiting. Elena knew what he was waiting for. She had been stalling, avoiding the conversation that had been looming ever since they had crossed that emotional boundary days ago. It wasn't just about exploration anymore. It was about choice. "I can't stay here forever," she said, her voice tinged with a sadness she hadn't anticipated. The words hung in the air, heavy with the reality of what they meant. "My mission was never meant to be permanent. I'm supposed to return to Earth to report what I've found, what I've discovered with you." Tsiar remained still, but Elena could feel the shift in his energy. He understood what she was saying. The connection between them, the bond that had formed, was at risk of being severed, and neither of them wanted that. But the reality was inescapable. Elena was human, bound by her responsibilities to Earth, to her people. She couldn't abandon them, even for the incredible connection she had found here on Zyphar 6. But there was another layer to the decision, one that Elena hadn't yet spoken aloud. It wasn't just about returning to Earth, it was about what she would bring back with her. The knowledge of Tiar's existence, of his species, would change everything. If she returned with the full report, if humanity knew about the intelligent life here, what would happen? Would they come in peace, as explorers and diplomats? Or would they see Zyphar 6 as a resource to be exploited, Tsiar's species as a curiosity to be studied, dissected, and categorized? Elena's mind swirled with conflicting thoughts. She had spent her life as a scientist, driven by the pursuit of knowledge. But now, standing on the precipice of this discovery, she realized that knowledge came with a cost. And the price of revealing Zyphar 6 to the wider universe might be too high. "I don't want to leave," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But if I stay, it changes nothing. Eventually they'll come looking for me, and when they find you, I don't know what will happen." Tiziar's body flickered with a series of intricate light patterns Elena had come to recognize as his way of processing complex emotions. He stepped closer to her, the space between them shrinking until she could feel the faint warmth of his energy pulsing through the air. Gently, he lifted one of his limbs and placed it over the area where Elena's heart would be. The sensation that followed was unlike anything Elena had experienced before. It wasn't just the familiar pulse of Tsiar's energy, it was something deeper, more intimate. She could feel his mind pressing against hers, not with the force of telepathy, but with a gentle, probing curiosity. He was trying to understand her emotions, her conflict. And for the first time, she sensed that he wasn't just curious, he was afraid. The realization hit her like a wave. Tsiar's species, so advanced and logical, had never needed to confront emotions in the way humans did. But now, after the bond they had formed, he was beginning to understand the depth of what it meant to feel. And with that understanding came vulnerability, a vulnerability that mirrored her own. Elena took a deep breath and placed her hand over his limb, feeling the faint vibration of his energy beneath her fingers. "We don't have to say goodbye," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can stay longer, but eventually." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The truth was, she didn't want to leave. The connection she had with Tsiar went beyond the scientific, beyond the intellectual. It was emotional, primal, and it had awakened something in her that she hadn't realized was missing. But her duty to Earth still loomed large in her mind. Tsiar's lights shifted again, this time forming a more deliberate pattern. It was a sequence she had seen before, one they had shared when discussing the concept of home. He was asking her where her home was, where she truly belonged. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the question. Where did she belong? Earth was her home, the place that had shaped her, the planet that held her memories, her family, her identity. But here, on Zyphar 6, she had found something that transcended home. She had found a connection that defied the boundaries of species, of space, of everything she had known. "I don't know," she finally answered, her voice quiet. "I don't know where I belong anymore." The silence between them stretched on, filled with the unsaid. Tsiar didn't press her, but she could feel his understanding deepening. He wasn't just a being of logic and reason anymore. He had learned from her, and in learning he had changed, just as she had. After a long pause, Tsiar moved closer again, his presence a comforting warmth against the growing tension in Elena's chest. He lifted one of his limbs and gently touched the side of her face, his bioluminescent glow casting soft light over her features. The contact was light, almost imperceptible, but it was filled with meaning. He wasn't just asking her to stay, he was offering her something more. A choice. Elena could feel it in the air, in the gentle pulse of energy that flowed between them. The decision was hers to make, and no matter what she chose, Tsiar would accept it. He wasn't trying to persuade her or manipulate her. He simply wanted her to understand that whatever path she chose, it would be her own. The weight of the moment settled over her like a heavy fog. She could stay here, with Tsiar, on this alien world where she had found something rare and beautiful, or she could return to Earth, to the life she had known, and face the consequences of her discovery. "I don't know what the right choice is," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. Tsiar's eyes flickered softly, and Elena felt the faintest brush of his thoughts again. "Neither do I." The words weren't spoken aloud, but she understood them nonetheless. Tsiar didn't have the answers any more than she did. They were both navigating uncharted territory, bound together by a connection that defied explanation. And in that moment, Elena realized that the decision didn't have to be made immediately. There was time to explore, time to learn, time to simply be. Elena let out a long breath and smiled, the tension in her chest easing just slightly. "Maybe we don't need to decide right now," she said softly. "Maybe we can just be here for a little while longer." Tsiar's body pulsed gently in response, and Elena knew he understood. There was no rush, no pressure to make a decision that would shape the future of two worlds. For now, they had each other, and that was enough. As the sun began to set behind the crystalline spires, casting long, shadowy fingers across the surface of the planet. Elena and Taziar stood side by side, their connection deeper than ever before. The universe was vast, filled with endless possibilities and unknowns, but in this moment, on this alien world, they had found something rare. They had found understanding. And for now, that was all that mattered.